I say let's go ahead and get started and call to order at 7:02 p.m. Welcome, everybody. I know it's late on a Tuesday, so thanks for agreeing to have a joint committee meeting with us as we've further progressed in our roles as the CDC. I think we've finally got to a place where we've found our footing and coming up with our strategic plan last year, have a better understanding of how we can best serve the town and help move some things forward as it relates to some of the challenges that we think that we have here in the town in a positive way. So certainly would like to have the opportunity for everybody to introduce themselves. I'm familiar with most of you. However, we have some new members on our committee and some that have been with us for some time that just may not know who you guys are. So if you don't mind just letting them know your name and a little something about yourself, and we'll just move it around the room. And let's see if I can see everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Natisha Rivera-Patrick. I serve as the chair of the Cultural Diversity Committee. In my daytime job, I am president and CEO of Greater Matthews Habitat for Humanity. Thus my interest not only in the racial equity piece, but certainly the affordable housing initiatives as well. So with that, whoever would like to go next there.
Well, since I'm just looking at the screen, I'll go next. I'm Mike Foster, the chair of the Matthews Planning Board. This is my 5th year on the board, and I'm almost 25-year resident of Matthews now, and I don't think I'm ever going anywhere else. I do still have a day job. I work with trade licensing for the company that I work for. Get to work from home. I was even working from home before the pandemic hit, so it's a nice place to be.
Nice to meet you.
I guess I can follow this setup. I'm Natasha Edwards, and I'm the vice chair of the planning board. I actually moved to Matthews about 6 years ago, so I'm a fairly newer resident to the town, but we fell in love with it immediately, and I'm happy to do my part in being on boards and things like that. I am an architect and for my day job, and so I try to bring some of that experience to the planning board.
Can I say one thing about Natasha while she's wrapping up here? Natasha, congratulations for being named one of Matthews' 100 most powerful women.
Oh, thank you. Tisha was on that too, I believe.
Tisha was on that too, guys.
Yeah.
Congratulations to that.
One of our former members, Jana Reed, was also on the list.
Mm-hmm. Well done. Women's History Month. Awesome.
All right, well, I'll jump in. My name is Marilyn G. I'm the vice chair of the CDC. This is my 2nd year on the CDC, I think. Mm-hmm. My daytime gig, I'm an educator at a public charter school for gifted education. And I don't know what everyone else has said, but that's about it.
You're a Matthews resident.
Oh my gosh, I'm Matthews resident for 16 years. Yes, my son, Bulldog, he's old now, so I forget about that. Yes, Matthews resident. President of the Homeowners Association, love my town, love Matthews, yay. It is a long day. It's been a long day, but good to see everyone.
I'll go. I'm Mike Rowan. I'm like Jim Johnson here, I'm a lifetime member of the Matthews community, 59 and a half years old, born, raised, still here. Going to be here. Since you're a Bulldog, I do pull the chains for the Bulldog football team. I volunteer, even though I was an Eagle, fly, Eagles fly. But it's okay. I enjoy serving on the planning board, have for the last 5 years. And so that's kind of my history.
I guess I'll follow that up since Mike threw me in there, but grew up in Matthews. I mean, I walked at Matthews Elementary School when I was a kid, left for a little bit, was doing different things, but I came back because I love the town and I love most everything I can think about Matthews. So planning board is a good place to be. I think you can help a little bit there. I mean, but I I've been running the bike shop for a few years and ran an internet company and just kind of been trying to be an entrepreneur in Matthews my whole life, it seems like. So anyway, I live in downtown, so I walk everywhere. I don't even hardly drive a car. Oh, and I got to. Here's my cat.
I'm Tom Dorsey, one of the newer members of the planning board. Moved to South Charlotte in '95, and 3 years ago moved 2.5 miles to Matthews. Retired in 2016 from Wells Fargo. I was in their real estate group, the group that manages the properties that the bank owns, occupies, leases, and so forth. And a number of years ago, I chaired the diversity committee for a 20,000 member real estate appraisal organization that's headquartered in Chicago. And for that committee and in that role, I know that the organization struggled with what our role would ought to be, and we at the same time were trying to change our role to be a lot more expansive than they had been used to it being. So I'm looking forward to this evening's.
I guess I'll go. Jonathan, I've been here about a year on the planning board, and I'm a GIS administrator for a telecommunications company in Rock Hill. So,
Like your hat, Jonathan.
thanks. It's cold down here.
I'm Bob Hughes on the Diversity Council, retired clergy and medical social worker.
Carrie Lampson, it looks like you want to go next.
Only if I can unmute.
Good job. Good job.
Yes. So I'm Kerry Lampson. I've been sitting on the planning board for 5 years. My wife and I moved here in 2011 from the West Coast, trying to pursue retirement. And so far we've been reasonably successful. We've chaired a couple of other subcommittees on my time on the planning board. I have a special interest in affordable housing, among other activities that we've been involved in as a planning board.
Okay, you guys want me to call names? I don't have a problem calling names. Jay Camp, you're up.
I know. I was looking at the faces trying to figure out who hadn't gone. Well, for those of you that don't know me, I work in the town's planning and development department. I'm the planning director for the town. I've worked here. Time goes by fast. I've worked here for 15 years now. It's my connection to Matthews. Both my kids were born here. I'm a native Charlottean. I don't think there was a hospital in Matthews yet when I was born, but looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Thank you.
I'll go next.
I was calling you next, Angela. That was good.
Okay. Well, I am Angela Charles, and both my kids were bulldogs, so I can identify with that. And I lived in Matthews for many, many years. I live in the county now, but I feel this deep connection to Matthews because I just absolutely love the town. And professionally, I am the director of Charlotte Water. And so sitting and participating on the Cultural Diversity Committee is very beneficial to me personally, but also from a professional perspective. And so that's why I'm here.
Miranda.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm a Youth Voice member, and I've lived in Matthews for 8 years, I think. I attend Providence High School, so not in Matthews, but close. Go Panthers. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Welcome, Miranda. Miss Ashley.
I'm Ashley Coomer, and I have lived in Matthews since about 2013, so 7.5 years. My husband and I moved here from Atlanta area. And currently I work at a local charter school. I work in the office doing administrative tasks and testing, and I also teach American history. And I just started on the CDC committee in October of last year.
Shayna?
All right, we'll go Atlanta, born and raised in Atlanta. I am the deputy town clerk and the administrative specialist for the planning department. So I do the minutes for planning, for the planning board and for the board of adjustment. I did want to note that Miranda and Prayag are our newest youth voice members, and we're so excited to have them, to have that youth voice in with our group. And I did want to note too, just for minutes, since this is recorded and everything, the two members that I'm missing from diversity are JP Johnson and Chuck Wilson. Is that correct? They're not here.
Eva Johnson, yes, and Pastor Chuck. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then everybody else is here, both from planning board and cultural diversity. So we're good. And that's me.
Thank you. And I want to make sure, is it Prayag?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, perfect.
My name is Prayag Patel, and I go to Butler High School, and I've lived here for 17 years since I was born, and I'm part of the youth voice, and looking forward to learning.
Welcome. Well, I think that's everybody. Hazen, we all know who Hazen is. Do you need an introduction? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move forward. So I'm sure through conversations at the town, many of you have heard that we hosted a 21-day racial equity building challenge back in November. By a show of hands, did you guys hear about it at all? No? Yes, some of you? So what we did, we came upon this challenge and thought this would be a good way, almost, not that this is new to us as a committee. We've been around for some time, and as I mentioned, we struggled, I think, to kind of find our footing and get some traction. And we felt this 21-day challenge gave us an opportunity to, one, come together as a committee and educate ourselves on some of these matters. But this was a great introduction we felt, for the mayor and the commissioners to get a better understanding of what type of work, what areas of focus we would have as we move forward as a committee based on the strategic plan we had developed in 2020. And so we made the invite back in October, asking them to join us on this 21-day journey, which started on Election Day of all days, if you remember what that was like last year. And we had the mayor, Hazen, of course, as town manager, and 5 of the commissioners participate in the challenge. And so we were very pleased to have all of them step up and participate. But Marilyn, I thought it would be appropriate if you shared with them a little bit about what the challenge is. Marilyn was gracious enough to serve as the facilitator for the challenge. And so what we did, it is a 21-day commitment. However, you kind of go at your own pace. So each day you get to select an activity that you do, whether it's reading an article, watching a video. What's great about the resources that are out there, it actually shows you. So if it's a video, it may say, 8 minutes long. If it's reading, it may say 10 minutes. So based on the amount of time you have in your day to dedicate to this, it's really well laid out where you can pick something that fits the time that you have. And what we did as a group was we committed to come together once a week for 2 hours to talk about whatever the topic was for the week, to debrief, to be able to ask questions and share dialogue as we went through this journey, culminating on that 4th week to kind of bring everything together. And so the time commitment is not huge, but what we found and what I think the participants found, and certainly later here in the conversation, I would love for Hazen to share what his experience was. It really serves to be transformative if you take the time and get into this. And I learned a lot, and I've continued to learn because I did our 21-day challenge and then the United Way recently did one as well. They had about 16,000 people participate in theirs. And so I participated in that as well, just to see what they did, how they did it, so that we can continue to refine what we do, because our goal is to be able to offer this to not only other members of the town that are interested in other groups within the town, but to start to offer it to the citizens of Matthews as well. Whether we do that quarterly, we're working on what that plan will be, but want to make this available to residents. And so, Marilyn, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about the challenge itself for the group.
No, I don't mind at all. So thank you. I was thinking about what you said. I was wondering if you were going to mention the United Way challenge, because yes, ours was considerably more, a little bit more intensive, which we thought was appropriate because, like we said, we had Ashley coming on. We had our new members, our new CDC members coming on. So we wanted to make sure it was something that we could use as kind of orientation for them and then for ourselves. And then once the idea came up to invite the mayor and all of the commissioners, we thought it was kind of an idea that came off in a different conversation. We didn't even think it was going to be such a wonderful feedback. And the feedback was completely amazing, the complete buy-in. And that was a very rich experience, right? You know, as Natisha said, starting with Election Day, ending right before Thanksgiving break, right? And so we had, I had some of the dates here when we met on those, I think it was our Tuesdays or whatever, when we had our Zoom meetings. Were pretty intensive. So throughout the week, there, you know, you can do your various things. The More website, very well done, it's very laid out for anyone who's kind of an autodidactic person who likes to work on their own. It's kind of there for you to set up and kind of track your progress and kind of rate yourself and give yourself different times. So that's kind of very the opportunity for you to be autonomous. But what we were able to see in hindsight with the way that the United Way presented theirs was, it was much more, because it was, what did you say, 16,000 people? So it was a much bigger group. So they didn't have like a Zoom meeting 4 times a week like we did. So when I looked at theirs, at first we felt like, I'm glad we inspired them, but it was also an opportunity for people to kind of go at their own pace. And then at the end of the 21 day, I think, or maybe it was just under 21 days, this were a little different than ours, but what I think ours had that worked for us, and depending upon whether or not how we wanted to proceed, one way being better or finding a happy medium between those, with the kind of regular check-ins, with the conversations, as opposed to one big at the end with having an individual thing. It kind of varies. But for us, it was very intense. I mean, it's the mayor of our town, right? I mean, so just in terms of hierarchy, in terms of the real world that we live in and these very sensitive topics. So, I mean, and then having to wear kind of this helmet myself as being the facilitator and kind of wear these hats and do the stance. I mean, it was very initially, I won't say intimidating, but it's just important to make sure that the intentions and the outcomes are equally met, right? And I felt like that was well done. My committee members have told me that was well done. I mean, there are still things that I think about in that experience, conversations we had. I want to say I wish they were private, but they weren't, just like this meeting isn't private. I mean, anyone who wants to be here, it's open to the public. So I think that lended to the conversation in a different way. I don't think it hindered it. Also, we kind of talked about going forward, maybe having Zoom breakout groups so people could have more intimate conversations. So different ways to kind of tweak it in terms of going forward. But in terms of the resources that are available, where you are, what you're interested in, how you can work it for yourself individually, I mean, it's amazing. And not assuming who knows what, how little, how, how well invested you are in this, because I took notes on Mr. Tom Dorsey and his Chicago, chairing the diversity committee. There's certain things like you don't know that about someone and what that work has been and what that looks like, because things work on a loop and a cycle. And so I don't want to overtalk because I know we have an agenda, but what I can say to you and kind of bringing this thing to a close is that however, if we choose to go forward or when we choose to go forward, it's not reinventing the wheel. So there are a plethora of ways to go forward with the 21-day racial equity challenge to, kind of meet everyone's needs and still have it be very kind of informative and transformative. And like I said, I'm a fan. I don't want to overtalk because I know Natisha likes to hear all the voices, and I know I heard Natisha say something about she wanted Hazen to speak too. So I don't want to overtalk, but it was very beneficial. I think once we became kind of safe and comfortable with each other in this forum, I mean, it was something that I'm glad I was a part of, and I'm glad I did and would happily do again. So.
And for those of you that don't know, the purpose of the challenge is to further your understanding of power, privilege, supremacy, oppression, and equity. So in those words, you probably felt triggered or, maybe even felt some kind of way about that. And so what's great about this is it offers a safe space to learn, to ask questions. And I agree with what Marilyn said. I think the first week, we didn't quite know what to expect. We didn't know how open the commissioners, mayor, and everybody would be, and especially because it is a public forum. These are very sensitive topics, and so we didn't know how guarded individuals would be. And so I think the first week, we just kind of got to know each other, got to know a little bit about the content and what the expectations were as we move forward. And I think that second week, folks really started to blossom. And by the time we hit the third week, I think it really was full on sharing. And so we were very pleased to see that progression and really wish we even had more time when it was done. And that was some of the feedback that we received, as many of them wanted to know what else they could do or what other resources were available to help further their understanding. And so ideally, this is we would love to do this in person. And obviously, given COVID and everything that we're still dealing with, Zoom has been our go-to. But as we move forward, we would really like to do this in person, because when you're talking about subjects that are so sensitive, being able to have that interpersonal communication and being face-to-face with somebody in the room, it just provides a different element, which, it gets us back to our humanity. And I think we're just well served to be able to do that. And so we were very pleased with the participation, with what was shared and the comments and the feedback. And so we certainly want to make this available to any of the groups within the town that want to participate in the challenge. And then, as I said, to the greater public. I've even offered this up. I was sharing with Hayes, and I met with Mint Hill's mayor and town manager last week about something different, but brought this up because Mint Hill could also benefit from this challenge, and so certainly wanted to make it available to them should they choose to want to participate. We would not deny them that. So are there questions about the challenge, or, even if you all have an interest, I don't know if you've had any discussion about that, about participating in that. That's something we would certainly love to invite you guys to participate in.
Natisha, how can we participate?
Well, so it's just a matter of letting us know that it's something that the group would like to do, and then the committee would get together and come up with dates that work for everybody, because I think the format we did last time is what we'd like to repeat, where we would do the 21 days and have that once a week dedicated time to debrief. And wasn't it an hour and a half that we did, guys? I think it was 7 to 8:30, I think was our time. And so that's what we would be looking for.
Yep. But I was going to suggest, and I don't think I have control of the chat. I was going to say to drop the website in the chat. So if anyone wanted to look at it first, because everything, the Webmore, the 21-day challenge chat, because some people will get an email address or website and never pay attention to it. And other people are like me who'll go down a rabbit hole and start to see things, go, oh my gosh, I'm really interested in this. So just to get a chance to put your toe in the water, I was going to suggest that. Because right now, and I didn't realize when you said that to me, I was supposed to talk specifically about the challenge itself and not go off on a tangent. So I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, no, that's okay. And if it's helpful, I actually have, Hayes, and I could send it to you, the original email invitation that I sent to the mayor and commissioner. So it talks about the challenge. It has the links for different things that you guys can go and take a look at and explore to see if this is something you would be interested in. And after you have the opportunity to review that, certainly feel free to circle back with Hayes and to say, hey, we would like to do this. Can we look at some potential dates? That way you have a better understanding of not only the content, but the expectations as a part of the challenge. Does that work for everybody? Okay, we'll do that. Hey, it's not, I'll send that to you and you can send that to the group.
If the planning board's interested in kind of taking the next step, I would suggest a facilitator. Marilyn was our facilitator with the town board, and I thought we had a really good conversation. We did it with the department heads, and it was a little tougher without a facilitator. And I know Angela did it with Charlotte Water, and y'all had a facilitator. So I think it would be a smart move to figure out how we can do that. And the only thing I would say is, for me, it was a great learning experience. Like, really, oh my gosh, here's a whole nother almost universe out here that I was not really aware of. And I hope most of us like to learn, and it really was a great learning experience. And Marilyn's right. You can take all kinds of paths. It's just like going on Wikipedia and like hitting all those links, and it's like, oh my gosh, here's where I've ended up. You can do the same thing with racial equity and get some great information.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Anything else that any of the committee members would like to share about the challenge? No, everybody's good. So, okay, I'll commit to sending that to Hazen, and that way you guys can review that and circle back, because we would love to be able to present that to you. And for us, for myself, it only deepens our understanding the more we do it, because when they talk about going down these rabbit holes, you may go watch one of the videos, and then you see something else on the side and you get into that. Before you know it, you're an hour and a half into however many videos you just watched, because there's just so much information out there. So I'll be happy to do that. The other thing we had talked about as a committee is wanting to sit with you all to talk about affordable housing initiatives. So what your thoughts are on affordable housing, what's currently being done, are there things in the pipeline? Obviously, I work for Habitat for Humanity, and we have a relationship with the town, and we know we are only one solution to the housing crisis that we have across the nation, but would love to hear what kind of initiatives, if any, are underway, or any new partnerships that may have formed in that arena. That might be a J Camp question.
Yeah, I can kick it off, and maybe just to take a step back, does everyone on the diversity committee sort of know what the general charge is, like what planning board does?
I don't think so. So that would be a great start.
Okay. So I would say, if I had to sort of summarize it quickly, planning staff and planning board work jointly as essentially the keepers of the vision for how the town's going to grow and develop in the future. The work we do is extremely varied. If I had to bisect it, it would be sort of separated into current planning. So these are the development projects you see around. You read about rezonings in the newspaper, and this board may be looking at housing density, how many trees are preserved on the site, is there connectivity to an adjacent development, what's the impact to schools, and anyone add something if you want to, but there's probably 100 other items that could be evaluated. So yeah, this group's looking at development projects, but also they're the stewards of our Unified Development Ordinance. So we make text changes, all of the requirements and all of the code requirements throughout the town for those things like tree save, parking requirements, all of that. Long range planning. We recently completed a downtown mobility study, which this group reviewed as part of the process. So it's a very broad and sort of complex work that they undertake. It's complicated, and affordable housing is just sort of one cog in that's recently been elevated. And our subcommittee, Carrie, was that in 2018? Has it been 3 years already?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 2 years? It's only been 2 years. Wow. And that's a conversation that's happening in metropolitan areas across the country right now. And how do we address affordable housing? And I think more and more cities, communities, and even the development community are recognizing sort of a responsibility to step up to the plate right now. And that's fortunately a good thing. We've had some really great successes just recently. I don't know if Mike or Carrie, if anybody wants to sort of highlight what you've seen come before your board over the past 6 months.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks again to Carrie and to Natasha, because they were on a subcommittee a couple of years ago to take in-depth look at affordable housing and what we as a planning board and what the town of Matthews could do to ensure that we get this ramped up as much as possible. And certainly Carrie and Natasha can speak to that. I'll just preface that by saying, as Jay mentioned, we're starting to actually see some good traction. Over the last 2 or 3 months, we have had 3 applicants who presented to the planning board and to the town council their plans for new neighborhoods, basically. 2 of them, I believe, are rental. 1 of them is for sale. But in all 3 cases, the developers have offered to make a certain percentage of their homes, whether it be rental or sale, available for affordable housing, and made a commitment to doing that. And I think that's really a direct result of the work that Natasha and Carrie and the rest of the subcommittee did. I think it was a little slow getting off the ground after their report, but developers, I think, now understand that they need to come to the planning board and to the town council to talk about it, to be prepared to talk about it and talk about what they're going to do about it. Because 3 in a row, basically, have come up with good plans, which I think are going to really kind of jumpstart us into a much, much bigger plan in the future, is to go forward with more and more people coming to us without being asked and offering to work on affordable housing. Because what the board's done over the last couple of years is we've asked everybody. And in some cases, it makes for an uncomfortable conversation on the part of the developer, because they're trying to build a $750,000 house subdivision, and that puts them in direct opposition, frankly, with affordable housing. But I think partially because of the type of housing that's being planned now, and the price point, obviously, it's making it easier for developers, and maybe the developers are even making some adjustments to ensure that they can participate in affordable housing. Carrie, Natasha, anything from your work over the last couple of years? Because I know the subcommittee that really Carrie put together was very much cross-functional. It wasn't just planning board members, it was people throughout.
Yeah, you're right. And Natasha was on that as well, along with several other community members that helped out with that project. And I think, one thing that we talked a lot about in our meetings during that point was how, there's the stigma of affordable housing. And so a lot of what we talked about is and what we did in our report was try to show that affordable housing is for everyone and everyone needs it, and who's affected by it the most. So, you're talking about your workforce and workforce housing and things like that, and how trying to destigmatize that it's subsidized housing or something that is for people who aren't paying tax, or whatever people have against affordable housing. And so one thing that we did in our report was try to understand who those people are who need affordable housing. So talking about our teachers, our police officers, nurses, other community members that are essential. And it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see now that we have a different idea of who's essential. So, seeing how that might change as well. It could be an interesting second study.
Let me make a couple of comments as well, if you don't mind. The study that we did is now a little over 2 years old. Opened our eyes a little bit to, as Natasha just said, who it is that's being affected with the cost of housing in the town of Matthews. What we basically summarized was more than half of the households who live in Matthews are in some way, shape, or form taxed for housing, meaning that they're paying more than 30% of their income to housing-related expenses. From that process, we began dialogue, and I think the positives, as you mentioned, is we have more dialogue now at the board and the Board of Commissioners level. We have individuals there who are beginning to understand and champion and ask those types of questions. I will say, though, that it's been a couple of years, and I have a couple of concerns. I think given the current market situations, the impact of the pandemic that shut basic services down, I think the affordability gap is actually growing. I'm concerned maybe you would not be able to find a home for sale in Matthews under $200,000 today. And if it were there, it would be there about 6 hours and it would be gone. So those are the kinds of activities that we need to continue to evaluate how we might be able to make progress. But one of the discussions that we had, or what was suggested when we did our study, was that we should hire some professionals and they should investigate and research this and perhaps help the town build some additional ideas, additional strategies as to how this could continue to move forward in a very organized fashion. And it's great that we're getting ad hoc, if you will, volunteers from the development community offering a small amount of housing as percentages, as Mike mentioned, and that's all positive. But then the other thing we have to ensure is that we've got the mechanism to manage it. Because again, if you do these things and you want them to perpetuate, there is a set of services, there's a set of qualifications, there's a whole set of activities to do this well that you should be prepared as an organization or as a town to do. So again, I think education is key. I would love to see a second wave in this area over some period of time. One of the outgrowths of this is an organization was called the Matthews Housing Alliance, which Natisha and I are both part of, or were before everything kind of closed down, if you will. So there is interest. There are volunteer resources. There are individuals and organizations who clearly are interested in continuing to see the progress that we've made. And I think, to Mike's point, we've had significant progress from where we were 2 years ago, where we weren't really having a dialogue, to now we actually have projects being proposed to us that include or incorporate some form of affordable or workforce housing. So I think we're making great progress. My only concern is, the market is increasing, that there are opportunities in front of us, and I'd like to see us as an organization, as a town, find ways to maybe take another step or two in making sure we understand the best way to move forward.
Hey, Carrie, I'd like to add to that. I want to agree with you. When we, and I've been here and I remember those first couple of years, and that discussion would come up and it would move nowhere, right? I mean, it would, we would ask for what their consideration was for that as far as being a participant within the town of Matthews. I think, over the last couple of years, though, it has been refreshing to see that, it's a time and place thing too, right? But these opportunities for it's higher density, obviously, but being able to leverage that and to request for, housing that's affordable for our community, that's important to us. And I think, I've been happy to see that transition at least start moving forward. Is it complete? No, I'm not going to agree to that either. But I will say, but we have made progress in that forum, as far as at least making it a discussion, having those opportunities present themselves and taking advantage of that. And I think it's a betterment for our community as a whole.
Harry, I'm glad you brought up bringing the professionals in. The town board, we had the town's annual planning conference in February of 2020, just before COVID took the world over. And one of the items that was discussed was a housing needs assessment. I think at that time, and Hazen, correct me if I'm wrong, the board felt really strong that this was a logical next step for the town to take to really have an outside group come in and assess what the town's actual needs are, because there are boilerplate programs around the country you can try to apply, but there needs to be something that's actually focused for our community in particular. So that is something that we haven't yet brought to the board, but it is in progress. Some of those strategies, numerous, but just off the top of my head, there are communities out there that allocate a penny of their tax rate for affordable housing, communities that have density bonus requirements. So a developer can build more housing in a project if they earmark a certain percentage for affordable. Inclusionary zoning, which is really a requirement that you provide affordable housing, or you pay potentially a fee in lieu Chapel Hill's had a program for a long time. Some communities have had varying success with it. So I think we would want to understand what the best plan of action would be for the town.
And I think too, when the committee came together to do the study, the biggest piece of that was bringing awareness to the fact that these needs are a reality in Matthews. And so even some of the folks that we see with our critical home repair program, you have people that are living within the confines of Matthews that don't have running water, that don't have a roof. They may have a tarp on their roof. That's happening in Matthews. And so it's not only a lack of affordable housing as it relates to existing and new construction, but also helping people maintain what is already an affordable unit by making these critical home repairs, making them safer, drier, warmer, allowing seniors to age in place by making accessibility modifications. So, that's the work that we do in our space. And so I'm going to take off my CDC hat and put on my Habitat hat. As you start to have conversations with these developers and as you start to look for partners, I certainly hope that Habitat is at the top of that list because we've been doing this work in Matthews for 31 years. We are currently the only one providing affordable housing in Matthews and these critical home repairs at no cost to Matthews residents. And so we certainly want to be at the table and be a part of that dialogue because we know how to do it. We know how to vet it. We do have resources. And so I don't know if you've seen our new housing products. Our current development we're working on is over on Weddington Road, which is technically Charlotte because literally the border goes around our 4 houses. But it's a 2-story model. And part of our goal, or at least mine since I've been at Habitat, especially now that we're going to be doing more infill projects, is that we aesthetically fit the neighborhoods that we're going into. And so you can't drive by one of the houses we're building now and say, oh, that's a Habitat house, and so we're really working to provide a different product because we, as we've said on this call tonight, there's a stigma associated with affordable housing. But the truth of the matter is everybody needs affordable housing. And the definition is as simple as Carrie said, not spending more than 30% of your income on housing. That's whether you make $1 million a year or $20,000 a year. That is the definition. And so we certainly know that it is a need not only in Matthews, but across the country. It's going to be exacerbated as we start to come out of COVID. We know we're going to see a high number of evictions and folks losing their homes, which is horrible, but is going to be a reality for many families here in the future. So we certainly want to work to help maintain and keep those that are in their homes in them as long as we can. But certainly keep that in mind as you start to move forward with these initiatives. The town has been a great partner to us. You work with us when we do a development. You all will come in and do the sidewalks for us, and so all of those things, those costs that we're able to then take that money that's not spent to put into another project, whether that's new construction or our critical home repair. So I do want to thank you for that. Carrie mentioned the Matthews Affordable Housing Alliance, and there is a website for that. And that actually was born after we did have the initial meeting where Carrie went over the results with the town board and mayor. And then we met about a month later to kind of debrief. We gave them some time to chew on that a little bit. And we met, and what we heard in the room that day, and Hazen was a part of that meeting, is that the problem was so big, they didn't know where to start. And so because this is my space, this is what I do, my thought was, and my new mantra became, inaction is not an option. So what can we do? And so I talked with Hazen and I talked with Mayor, it was Mayor Bailey at the time, and said, all right, these are things that you're already doing and that you're doing very well. These are some low-hanging fruits and some opportunities. And outside of that, I came up with the idea of the Affordable Housing Alliance to bring this group together to come up with these solutions and these ready-made partnerships so that we can come to the town, not with an expectation that they be the problem solver, but they be a partner in whatever kind of packaged product we can bring to them or partnerships to help move those initiatives forward. So we haven't met since the pandemic. We've met virtually a few times. We do plan on re-engaging that to continue that work and effort that we started because it's necessary. We don't have the expectation that the town be the problem solver. It's just not within your scope. So what does that look like, feel like, and what part do you play to help move it forward? So I'm looking forward to re-engaging. And Jay, I'd certainly encourage you to come and sit in on one of those meetings next time that we're up and running. I think that would be valuable.
Hey, Natasha, just for point of reference, how many homes? I remember, when Habitat first started in Matthews, that was big hoopla. It was great. Everybody felt good. But how many homes? Just as a point of reference, have you guys been involved in our?
The one we're building now is number 114.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Yeah.
Did I get the voice that Habitat is changing its product design mix in some places, and instead of having exclusively detached single-family homes, maybe has some duplexes or 4 units?
Right. So each affiliate is different. Part of our strategic plan we put out last year is to start, because from a density standpoint, we can't find affordable lots. And so, yes, we want to look at doing, whether it's a duplex, a quad, or I don't know what you would call a 6th unit, if they have a term for that. If they do, I don't know. But yes, to take advantage of some type of townhome model where we're able to provide a home ownership opportunity, but take advantage of density as well. So that is in our scope.
So one of the things, and again, I know this much about this, but one of the things that strikes me is, when we have developers say that they're willing to set aside so many units for such and such a percentage less than the typical income, I think that's great. But I think the need is so much more than that, because say they're going to work with people who are 30% less than the average income. What about the people that are 50% less than the income, who are struggling even to just have a roof over their head? And that's probably something that's beyond the scope of, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but beyond the scope of both of these committees. But it's a need in the greater community that needs to be addressed, and maybe it's something that we can find a way to address with some of the new developments, some of the other initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's always going to be more demand than there is housing, and that's a nationwide problem. Part of the issue, though, it's not only the housing stock that we're producing and the cost of that, but it's coupled with the fact that we don't have a livable wage. So housing will always remain unaffordable until we get wages to a point where folks can afford adequate housing. So there will always be a gap. You're absolutely right, Tom. There is a need at all levels, even Habitat. So for us, our typical range, we're 80% and below AMI, but we typically end up with between the 50 to 80% is where we find our families are coming in that range. And so Habitat, there's many habitats that have gone away from that very, very low income because of the challenges that they have in maintaining a home and just the everyday expenses of that. And so, right, there needs to be a different alternative to what type of housing product can be offered to make sure that those folks have safe, affordable housing as well. So I don't know what the solution to that is. Even our homes right now, our homes on Weddington Road are $237,000. I mean, what makes it affordable for our families, because we offer the mortgage at 0%, the family only has to earn $40,000 a year for that to be an affordable home still. But for folks that are just going and getting a traditional mortgage, even if you're at 3 or 4%, that's a deal breaker, or having to have money down. There's just, people don't have 20%. I don't care what level of income they are. Most people don't have 20% down to put on a house. So it's pricing a lot of folks out of the market.
And Natasha, is that on a 30-year? Is that a 30-year note?
We can do 15 up to 40. Habitat just approved, but they're typically 20 to 25 based on where our homeowners fall.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think where some of the additional opportunities maybe are going, hit me back if I'm going down a rabbit hole here. But some of the challenges, big challenges, maintaining the home and paying the utilities and all the rest of that. And maybe, there's an opportunity with the town, with the county, to give breaks on real estate taxes. Maybe we could get Duke Energy to, give some sort of credit, or CMUD, et cetera, to, things like that. Because, and again, I zero in on habitat, but even with the developers setting aside these, percentage of their units, that's great. But then I think on our last call, we had a developer, someone was talking about what are the homeowners association dues going to be, because that could be a killer for them. They got into the unit, but now they can't afford to be there because of their associated fees.
Well, and that would be part of that vetting process. So like for us, same thing, that 30%, not exceeding that 30% includes all of those expenses. So that's one of the things as they're looking at who would potentially qualify for that, their income has to be enough to sustain that. Because otherwise, right, if you're not meeting that threshold, then you're setting them up for failure, because if they don't have the resources to take care of those expenses, it's not going to happen. And just as a side note, our homeowners, even with everything that's happened with COVID, I have 0% delinquency right now, none. All of my homeowners have been on time through all of this, which is amazing.
Do you have that laid out? Carrie, were you talking about that on that opportunity that came off of us behind that academy? We were discussing that, but you were looking for that formula. Is that, Natasha, is that where that formula comes into play? I mean, that we were discussing as far as affordability, pricing from a holistic standpoint.
Natasha's in row 3. I'm Natisha.
Natisha, okay, I'm looking all over the place.
So when
I didn't know, but I know Carrie was talking about that at one point, but I didn't know if that's what you were discussing.
Are you talking about that 30% threshold?
Yeah, and as far as how you get to that accumulative number from
Mike, and what we were talking about was when the developers were actually presenting to us, Natisha, they were talking about an AMI rate, but I was asking the question about, well, at what rates, how are you going to reimburse? And what I suggested to them is the fair market value information from HUD and other agencies where these are published. So you can go and take a look at, just like you could for Section 8 housing, you could see what voucher amounts are considered fair, which would be the rent portions or inclusive of what grant they might get if they qualified for a HUD financing or for a voucher. And those are things that are published and they're available by zip code. That information is a mechanism, if it's what you choose to use, to be able to price what a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom unit might be for a household of 1 through 6, if you will. Mm-hmm. Because there are formulas intended to help with that whole process, and they're published, so at least it gives you a benchmark, Mike, for where you can begin, and you can always go back to it. It's upgraded every year by HUD. It's factored for whatever inflation there might have been, et cetera, et cetera. So it's one vehicle as opposed to the mysterious, well, what is AMI this year? Or what is, and that meaning the area median income, for those of you that didn't mean to use the acronym, but it's about $78,000 a year is the average or a median income for Matthews as of 2021. So we're not talking about a small number here, but if you're talking about someone who's earning at the poverty level at 30 or 40% of that number, and they're a household of 5, that's actually virtually poverty. $30-some thousand a year for a family of 5, according to standards from HUD, you would qualify for as many options as you could apply for. The problem is that, there are not enough vouchers to go around. So again, in some of the research we looked at, there were 6,000 families in need and 2,000 vouchers. So to Natisha's point, there's a big gap in the process. Now, let me add one other comment, and I don't mean, there are organizations who are targeting various levels of homelessness, poverty, housing. Some of those are targeted for below a 60% level, but they use federal funds as grants. They use development funds. They use tax credit financing. They find ways to build units, and they do this. I mean, we have several prominent organizations like that in the Charlotte market. We just have not had any involvement with those entities here in Matthews, but there are models for success surrounding that. The challenge we have is they typically want to build 260 or more units, and that takes land. Something we don't have a lot of. And if you're faced with the idea of developing it in somewhat less revenue producing way, like less income housing, or you have the ability to go and develop it in a high end, what did we listen to the other day? $750,000, 2,000 square foot homes. Which one are you going to pick? So it is a delicate balance. Again, Matthews is a great town. It's got great infrastructure, great schools. It's a very popular market as a suburb of Charlotte. And so the income levels here and the housing here tend to be, let's say, a higher level average than you might find in some of the outer sections of, East and North Charlotte.
Any other questions or comments on the affordable housing issues? And same, feel free to circle back. I'm always willing to serve as a resource and answer questions. So feel free to reach out to me at any time with my Habitat hat on. The other item that we had on the agenda was around systemic racism, and was just asking a simple question, which may not be a simple answer, is in the past, has zoning been a tool in systemic racism? So how we've laid out this plan over time, do we feel that has had a part in doing some of what we're just talking about, kind of pricing out certain individuals and families?
Well, it definitely has been a tool. Before moving to Charlotte, I lived 29 years in South Florida, and there were very strange deed restrictions in different communities, and even zoning too. But I should give you three examples of deed restrictions. One is that thou shalt not produce or consume alcohol on your property. That was difficult to enforce. There were all kinds of restrictions on African Americans, on people of different religious affiliations, and the zoning played a role in that. A lot of it was done by private deed restriction. I think zoning probably came into play a lot with either architectural requirements or size of buildings, which did that. And then you've got gentrification and a lot of different things in development. So it's zoning has had a role. The question is, how then does zoning move to a role to change the direction? So create more opportunity.
And I apologize, I don't have the exact information right offhand, but there's a really good book by a historian about how zoning played into racial divide in Charlotte. And I'll find that information. He spoke at our company not that long ago, and he was an incredible speaker. So if you ever get a chance to listen to him speak, I'll find that information and send it out. But he did a great job of explaining how Charlotte used to be much more integrated, and then as Charlotte grew, it actually became really segregated and has never really recovered since. So I will find that information and pass it along.
You could just lot size and setback requirements can be a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when Hazen proposed some of the topics for this evening, I did, I've been thinking about this for a few weeks now, and I did want to touch on some things just from a planning perspective. First, I don't want you to walk away tonight thinking zoning is completely bad and we should abolish it, because there are a lot of positives with how zoning works and how cities develop, and you have the ability to have, some orderly control of how your community is built out, right? But I would ask you to kind of think back to, late 19th century, early 20th century, some of the first building codes, the crowded tenements in New York City, some of the first codes related to, fire safety after fires, light, air, people overcrowding. So zoning was sort of I guess it was a logical next step in the early 20th century. Communities all over the country adopted zoning when it was found to be constitutional in the 1920s. But to Tom's point, and Tom, it sounds like you have a lot of background on this from your work, there was really a two-prong approach to use deed restrictions and zoning to segregate our communities. And there's a book I'm going to share with you in a moment that does a really good job of setting out how this played out as part of the New Deal. It's very, very fascinating. But what I took away, and to Natasha's point, it wasn't just Charlotte, but our country as a whole was more integrated over 100 years ago than it is now. Like, we've done a really, let me rephrase this. It's been very intentional how our cities have grown and what they look like today, not just from a racial perspective, but from an income perspective. That the average citizen thinks that, homes should be in pots, that the $200,000 houses should be here, the 300 here, the 400 there. And the idea of neighborhoods that have different styles of housing. You can go through Dilworth or Myers Park or the old streetcar suburbs and see duplexes and quads, and it's seamless. No one thinks that their single family home across the street is devalued by the mere presence of a quadplex across the street. And you've probably all noted in the news, Charlotte, my peer Taiwo in Charlotte is working on the new comp plan, and it's run into a lot of controversy, quite frankly. You hear the term eliminate single family zoning being thrown around in the country. And it's really communities taking a stab at trying to reintegrate from a housing perspective and introduce affordable housing back into their communities. So I think the number I recall is something like 70+% of land in cities across the country is zoned strictly single family. And that's a long history, and it's going to take a long time to make progress on it. But so the answer, Natasha, is yes. It's very structural. It's very intentional. How things, how our world has come to be what it is today. Now, so that's all very sobering. I think we're making good progress. But one of the books that I know some of you may have heard about this, I've talked to Hazen about it. It's The Color of Law. Very, very fascinating book if you haven't read it yet. This is actually a town copy. I need to bring it back to town hall and let it make its rounds, but it's a really good read, and it's I would say, it was I think he's a historian that wrote it, and this is all factual. This is not subjective material. It's not someone's opinion. These are actual facts. This is how our world played out over the past century. So I really recommend this as a good read, and I'll mute now. But thank you.
And Jay, we don't hate zoning. We know it's a necessary evil, so not at all. I do encourage, the planning committee and board as you move forward to think about, what are some of the things that are being done and being done elsewhere, or what's something that Matthews can be the first on, taking a step. And that's one of the things I know that Hazen has been a great supporter of the work we're doing with the CDC, the work that I do in my day job. And so I would certainly love to see that translate into the initiatives that you guys are pursuing as you move forward, doing that with intentionality, that knowing that this problem isn't going away. In fact, it's only going to grow. So we like to be the first at doing things. And so I'd be happy to help you be the first at doing any of those things. So thank you for your candor and in sharing that. That's helpful for us as well. And so first, let me say thank you, because we've gone longer than we said we would, but I think that this has been an important dialogue. So thank you for your time and attention. Are there questions that, Hazen, you have something you want to say?
I would like to say something. So in my experience, I've watched, and of course, the planning board's here too. So you guys sit here and watch it as well as we, staff does on the board. And it's always interesting to me to watch subdivisions, as an example, come to the town board. And if the value of the units are less than the perceived existing housing, the neighborhood comes out, right? And they you're going to make my house less valuable. And, we're not even talking about affordable housing here. We're just talking about maybe lower price points. And, I've been in local government for 35 years, but it's always interesting to me. It's hard for town boards when they're faced with, let's say, a neighborhood that fills up a room to vote against the wishes of the neighborhood. And so, like, I think about Matthews Methodist Church and the work they're doing. And what I've told them, just kind of, I guess, or Chuck Wilson, for instance, is like, the folks that want or support affordable housing can't just talk about it, in the church. And then when the public hearing comes around, they stay at home. People have to come out and be heard and speak up. Well, they don't have to, but if you want that balance, the board needs to hear from the other side of the fence. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but because they're definitely going to hear from the people that think it's a threat. And I'm not saying it's racism threat, but it definitely comes across as we don't want poorer folks with smaller houses next door to our bigger house. Is that race-based? I don't know if it's income-based or if it's like simple greed, but people just can't sit on their hands, as a editorial comment.
Mm-hmm. Hazen, I wanted to you reminded me of a phrase, because I think part of the issue too is the perception and the words that we use. And so I can tell you in our organization, we're talking more about diverse price point housing versus affordable housing, because you're exactly right. You reminded me of that. So it does, words matter to some people. And so I'm hearing more about diverse price point housing, and I'm hearing more about workforce housing. And I think that has to do with the perception of the word affordable. And it seems like it just, like you said, it brings out people in a way sometimes that they think that their neighborhood is going to go down or home values are going to be devalued. But when you start talking in terms of diverse price point housing, then it kind of has a kind of softer connotation to it. Workforce housing, and Hazen, I've said this, and I lived in Matthews for over 15 years. I often wondered if the guys who work for the town of Matthews, maintaining those sidewalks, could actually live in Matthews. Mm-hmm. And that bothered me. That was one reason why I wanted to join the CDC, is to kind of get a feel for kind of, what's going on, and if there needed to be a voice, even just being concerned about people who work for the town and can they live in the town. And that's where workforce housing comes in and diverse price points. So just kind of, I'm like you, I want to get on my soapbox, but you reminded me of the terms and maybe how those terms are used in the community can impact the reaction of the citizens when we want to look at different types of housing in Matthews.
I like that. I like that.
Angela.
First price points, but anyway, good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's definitely one piece of it. And then to what Hazen was saying, there also has to be a point where the people that are in those positions have to do what is best for the greater good, rather than worried about the constituents they feel might or might not vote for them or be mad at them because they're doing the right thing to move things forward. And so it's a double-edged sword, and I get that. And certainly perception is reality. I mean, this is the work I do, so I deal with this every day. And I actually provided to Hazen, Habitat International did economic impact studies for each of the affiliates and the areas that they serve that actually showed the return of what Habitat brings to the community. And it is really the exact opposite of what everyone thinks it does. And so it was great to be able to have that piece to share, to show the number of jobs created, the number of money returned to the tax base, and so it's about the dialogue, and it's how it's presented. And I know that from what I do. And you have to meet people where they are with that as well, to have a conversation to help them understand. And so there's no reason anybody working in this country shouldn't be able to afford a roof over their head, food to eat, and access to health care, period. So we'll continue to fight the good fight, and certainly are willing to partner in any way that we can across all the mediums that the town has available. So any other questions for the CDC or from the CDC to the planning board? Everybody's ready for bed? Well, I really appreciate the conversation tonight and taking the time to meet. I think we should definitely do this again. I certainly felt it was beneficial. I hope that you did. And I will send that email to Hazen to share with the group about the 21-day challenge. And we would love it if you guys consider participating in that. I think it's transformative if you allow it to be so. If there's nothing further, then I say we will.
I want to say quickly. Am I muted still? I tried to jump in before. Jay, yeah,
there you are.
That comment about the planning, vision and planning is very important. I don't know where that came from, but yeah, it's not terrible. It's wonderful. I think visionary planning is the most important thing ever. So let's be clear. I just want to say that. That's all.
That's right. We love
planning. Love planning.
All right, Hazen. I think we'll call it at 8:12 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Take care.